The slap echoed through the dimly lit restaurant, a sharp crack that cut through the hum of conversation and the soft clinking of glasses. Silence followed, thick and oppressive. All eyes turned toward the man at the center of the commotion, Ethan Blackwood, a billionaire, a mogul, a man of quiet power. Ethan sat still, dabbing his cheek with the edge of his linen napkin, his expression unreadable. He didn't react, not in the way that the man standing above him had expected. No anger, no outrage, just a slow, measured turn of his head, his dark eyes locking onto the fake cop who had dared to strike him. The man in the uniform, Greg Matheson, was breathing hard, his fingers still tingling from the slap. His cheap, unmarked badge gleamed under the soft restaurant lights. He had expected fear, compliance, a desperate attempt at apology. Instead, he found only silence, then movement, not from Ethan, but from the figures seated around him, men who had remained statuesque until now, blending seamlessly into the expensive atmosphere of the restaurant. The kind of men who were trained to be invisible until they weren't. Ethan's bodyguards. The smirk on Greg's face faltered. The shift in the room was subtle but undeniable. It was in the way the waiters backed away, in the way the guests who had frozen in shock now leaned in, their interest piqued by the impending reckoning. Ethan exhaled slowly, adjusting his silver cufflinks with deliberate precision. His voice, when he finally spoke, was smooth, level, and dangerously calm. "Do you understand now?" Greg's confidence flickered, but he straightened, puffing out his chest in defiance. "You don't belong here," he snapped. His voice was louder now, as if volume could compensate for the unease creeping into his bones. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his expression as unreadable as ever. "And why exactly is that?" Greg smirked, but was weaker now. He leaned in, his breath carrying the sharp scent of arrogance. "You know why." And then, without warning, he slapped Ethan across the face. Gasps rippled across the restaurant. A woman at a nearby table covered her mouth with a trembling hand. A waiter, mid-pour, spilled red wine across a pristine white tablecloth. A man near the bar clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. But Ethan, he remained still, controlled, silent. He turned his head back slowly, his gaze meeting Greg's with something far more unsettling than anger, patience. A chair scraped against the polished floor. Then another, and another. Greg's smirk wavered as figures rose from their seats, one by one. The men who had walked in with Ethan, the men who had sat quietly, blending into the background. They weren't just his friends. They were his protection. And now they were standing. One of them, a towering figure with ice-blue eyes, stepped forward. His voice was low, controlled, and carried the weight of an unspoken warning. "I'd rethink that last statement." Greg swallowed, his confidence cracking. Another man, shorter but just as lethal-looking, tilted his head. "Do you even know who you just put your hands on?" Greg forced a laugh, but it came out strangled. He was trying to regain control, but the power had already shifted. Some rich thug who thinks his sentence never finished. Because Ethan Blackwood, the man he had just slapped in front of an entire restaurant, reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once, then turned around. On the screen was a live news broadcast. Ethan Blackwood's face filled the frame. The anchor's voice carried across the stunned silence. Ethan Blackwood, billionaire philanthropist and owner of the largest private security firm in the country. Greg's stomach twisted. He had made a mistake, a catastrophic one. Ethan leaned in, his voice quiet but cutting through Greg's last shreds of arrogance. "Do you understand now?" Greg's fingers twitched toward his belt, his face burning with anger and something he had never felt before. Fear, real fear, because for the first time in his life, the man he had tried to intimidate wasn't backing down, and neither was anyone else. Greg's breath hitched as reality set in. He wasn't dealing with just anyone. He was dealing with a billionaire who commanded respect and power on a level Greg had never imagined. But arrogance was a stubborn thing. "I don't care who you are," Greg snapped, his voice higher than before, edged with the first traces of panic. "You people always think. He never got to finish." Marcus, Ethan's head of security, moved like a shadow, swift, efficient, The moment Greg took a step back, Marcus closed the distance, his hand shooting out to grip Greg's wrist with bone-crushing precision. A sharp twist, expertly applied pressure. Greg's knees buckled involuntarily as pain exploded up his arm. A strangled yelp escaped his throat. Another man, a bodyguard standing just behind Ethan, reached over and yanked the cheap badge from Greg's chest. He turned it over in his palm, examining it like a worthless trinket. Unregistered. Fake. His voice was cold. That's a felony. Greg's mouth opened, but no words came out. The walls of the restaurant seemed to close in around him. He had always relied on intimidation, on the weight of his uniform, on people knowing their place. But tonight, no one was afraid of him. They were watching with quiet judgment, silent satisfaction, as he flailed like a man who had finally run out of power. Ethan Blackwood rose from his seat, unhurried, smooth, towering. His presence alone made Greg feel smaller. He adjusted the cuff of his suit, his expression unreadable. Then he tilted his head, as if recalling something distant. What's that phrase? Ethan mused aloud. Greg's heartbeat pounded against his ribs. Ethan leaned in, his voice low, dangerous, deliberate. Oh, right. He let the words settle. You have the right to remain silent. Greg's breath hitched. But he wouldn't get that luxury, because before he could even beg, his arms were yanked behind his back. His shoulders twisted into a painful lock. The restaurant doors burst open. The real police stormed in. Greg had spent his life pretending to be the law. Now, the law had come for him. The moment the real officers entered, the fake bravado collapsed. Greg twisted, his face red, eyes darting desperately between the uniformed officers and the men surrounding him. I was just, he sputtered, but no one cared. His hands were forced behind his back, wrists snapped into cuffs with practiced ease. Click. Greg flinched at the sound. The entire restaurant was watching, their phones lifted, cameras rolling, capturing every humiliating second. Justice wasn't always swift. But tonight, it had arrived right on time. A reporter, who had somehow caught wind of the situation, shoved a microphone toward Ethan as Greg was dragged past him. Mr. Blackwood, any comments on the incident? Ethan glanced at Greg, whose face had gone from crimson to ghostly pale. Ethan smiled. No further statements at this time. Then he picked up his wine glass, swirled it lazily, and took a sip as the restaurant erupted into applause. By morning, the headlines had written themselves. Fake cop slaps black billionaire and pays the price. Ethan Blackwood humiliates imposter in viral video. Greg Matheson exposed. Fake badge, real consequences. Ethan scrolled through his phone, watching the news cycle churn out one headline after another. His security team had already compiled a dossier on Greg, a washed-up former mall cop with a string of minor infractions. A man who had tried to wield authority he didn't have. Not even a real cop, Marcus muttered, shaking his head. Just a man who wanted to feel powerful. Ethan set his phone down and smirked. And now, Marcus chuckled, he'll never feel powerful again. Greg sat in a cold holding cell, his head in his hands. The weight of his choices settled over him like a suffocating blanket. He had thought the uniform made him untouchable. But Ethan Blackwood had reminded him of the truth. Real power didn't come from intimidation. It came from respect. And Greg, he had neither. As the bars locked shut, Greg finally understood. He had spent years trying to put others in their place. Tonight, he had finally found his own.